My name is Wallace Parrish. I am 35 years old, and last Saturday, my world fractured in the Texas Hill Country. We were at my younger sister's lavish vineyard wedding when a coordinator handed me a paper badge inside a cheap plastic sleeve. It read, "Limited Access Guest." Before I could even process it, my mother leaned in close, her expensive perfume hitting me like a physical slap, and whispered, "That means no plate for you, Wallace." My 6-year-old daughter, Posey, did not even get a badge. They left her out completely. For 3 years, I had worked endless overtime shifts as a divorced ER nurse, skipping vacations and birthdays, saving $10,000 to put in a wedding envelope. But they did not know the truth. That money was not just a gift. That cash was the only thing holding their entire perfect day together, and I was about to take it back. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the channel where quiet people finally stop explaining themselves and let the truth do the talking. If you and I have ever had to stand our ground against people who should have had our backs, you know exactly how this feels. Drop a comment and subscribe. Before we get to the gift table, let us go back 6 months. I am an ER nurse at Hill Country Regional, and before that, an Army combat medic. 8 years of active duty, 2 deployments, the kind of resume that makes civilians thank you for your service while backing away, as if trauma were contagious. I came home in 2016 with a GI Bill, a bad knee, and the ability to stay completely calm while someone is bleeding out on a gurney. It turns out that staying cool under pressure is useful in more situations than you would expect. My daughter Posey is 6 years old now. She is the absolute best thing that came out of a marriage that could not survive my 3rd year of working night shifts. Her father packed up and moved to Oregon, and now he just sends a card on her birthday. We live in a small 1-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat in Burl Creek, Texas, the town where my family has been somebody for 3 generations. My place is clean, tight, and organized like a military supply closet. When your world is small, you learn to keep it sharp. Here is the harsh reality of being a parish in Burl Creek. People in this town know your last name long before they ever care to look at your face. My grandfather built the local custom furniture shop from the ground up. My father inherited it, and my mother married into the prestige of it all. And what about me? I am the daughter they call at 2 a.m. when someone needs an emergency ride to the hospital. I am the daughter who handles the flooded kitchen or deciphering the complicated insurance forms. But I am never the daughter they invite when there is a celebration or a family party. In my household, I was always treated like a 911 dispatch number, never an actual name on the guest list. Parrish & Sons Custom Millwork, established 1962. That wooden sign still hangs on Pecan Street, though the gold lettering is now the color of weak tea. My grandfather, Hal, started it with a table saw and a handshake. He built church pews, courthouse railings, and mantles for half the county. When he died in 2018, the whole town came to the funeral. My father, Roy, took over in the 90s. He is a good woodworker but a terrible businessman, though I did not know how bad until later. My mother, Brenda, was not born a parish. She grew up 3 streets over in a house with aluminum siding. When she married my father, she married the prestige, the prominent church pew, and the country club seat. My mother became Mrs. Parrish, the way some people become deeply religious, completely, loudly, and with absolutely zero tolerance for anything that threatened to expose her true origins. On the other hand, there is my grandmother, Nana Ruth. She is 83 years old, with a spine made of solid rebar and a distaste for social pretense that could strip paint off a wall. She still lives in the original Parrish family home on Cypress Lane, grows her own tomatoes in the backyard, and drinks her morning coffee pitch black. She loved my grandfather the way people love oxygen, quietly and constantly, without ever needing to announce it to the world. Nana Ruth is the only family member who ever looked me in the eye and said, "Show is expensive, Wallace. Substance is free, and your grandfather knew it." I should have listened to her sooner. The first time I truly understood my place in this family, I was 24. I had just finished my second deployment, spending 8 months in a forward surgical unit, stitching soldiers back together under buzzing lights. When my transport landed at Fort Hood, I expected them to run toward me. My mother had promised everyone would be there. The terminal was packed with happy families holding welcome signs, but as I scanned the crowd, there was no sign of mine. I called, but both of my parents went straight to voicemail. I stood there in my combat fatigues with my duffel bag resting at my feet, watching other families collide, cry, and hold on to each other. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. It read, "So sorry, hun. Cammie's photo shoot for the regional pageant ran long. We will celebrate this weekend." Of course, they never did. Nana Ruth was the only one who actually showed up. She was 2 hours late because she had been stuck behind a slow cattle trailer on Highway 281, but she made it. She took me to the diner on Main Street, ordered us chicken fried steak, and did not ask a single exhausting question about the war. She just sat with me, solid and quiet, like a harbor pier you could tie yourself to in a storm. If you walk into my parents' house, the hallway wall is an absolute shrine to my younger sister. Camille's pageant crowns, her college sorority composite, portraits of her at 15 and 20, and a shot of her laughing in a white sundress on an influencer's rooftop. There is not a single photograph of me in my military uniform. I confronted my mother about it once, and she just shrugged and said, "Military photos are so formal, Wallace. They do not match the aesthetic of the house." Aesthetic? For a hallway with water stains blooming on the ceiling? Then, 6 months before the wedding, Camille posted her announcement on Instagram. It was a slow-motion reel showing off a 2-carat diamond catching the Texas light. The caption read, "I said yes to forever with my best friend. Tucker Brandt, you are stuck with me." It got 14,000 likes in no time. My mother called me exactly 11 minutes after that post went live, her voice vibrating with frantic excitement as her words tripped over each other. "Tucker Brandt, the prestigious Brandt family. If you do not know the dynamics of Burl Creek, let me explain it. The Brandts are everything my mother wishes our family could be. Harlan Brandt owns the local auto dealership, the main strip mall on Route 87, and a sprawling ranch. Their son Tucker sells commercial insurance and drives a vintage vehicle worth more than my entire life savings and car combined. What I did not know back then was the massive secret nobody was supposed to find out. My father owed Harlan Brandt a lot of money. The shop had been bleeding cash for years, and my father had taken a massive personal loan from Harlan to keep the doors open. If you and I are being honest, we know exactly why they had to put on a show when they were drowning. This wedding was a high-stakes performance. There were 120 guests at a luxury vineyard that charged a fortune per head. Every single seat was a desperate signal to the town that the Parrish family still carried weight. And my mother had already started casting her actors for the grand play. "Wallace," my mother said on the phone that night, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "I have been telling everyone you are handling the wedding fund." I did not fully understand what that meant yet, but I said yes anyway, because that is what I do. I say yes, I show up, and then I bleed for them. $10,000. That is the exact amount I had managed to save. It took me 3 long years, starting the very month after my divorce was finalized. I took every single grueling overtime shift at the ER, picking up holidays because of the time and a half pay, and because my sweet Posy was too young to know the difference between Christmas and a regular Tuesday. I survived on cheap food and sheer willpower. I drove a beat-up car with over 212,000 miles on the odometer, and I never bought myself any clothes that were not marked down on the clearance rack at Target. That hard-earned cash was supposed to be Posy's future college fund, but I carved a piece of it off because I foolishly believed that a massive, generous wedding gift would finally change the toxic way my family saw me. I walked into the bank on a Thursday afternoon and requested a cashier's check for $10,000. The young teller behind the counter looked at me like I was handing him an explosive device. "That is a lot of money," he muttered. "It is for family," I told him, and back then, I truly meant it. I sat down and wrote a simple note to Camille on plain stationery. Nothing fancy. It just said, "Congratulations on your wedding. Posy and I are so proud of you. Build something beautiful together. Love, Wallace." I carefully tucked the $10,000 cashier's check and the note inside a clean white envelope, writing, "From Wallace and Posy," on the front in my neatest handwriting. Then I took a picture of the check, the letter, and the envelope, saving the photo to my phone. Maybe the combat medic in me always documents the scene before starting a procedure. Or maybe a quiet part of my soul already knew that this gift would not land the way I wanted. I was not trying to buy their love. I was testing whether it was for sale. My mother called me on a Wednesday evening, exactly 3 weeks before the big wedding day. I was in the middle of giving Posy a bath. There were rubber ducks floating around, the gentle scent of lavender soap filling the room. The kind of ordinary parental magic that briefly makes you forget how sharp the world can be. "Wallace, have you gotten the gift ready?" Her voice carried that very specific sweetness she only uses when she wants something from you but refuses to say please. "I have the check," I replied. "Great," she said. "Send it to me right away and I will combine it into the collective family gift. It will look much better that way." I watched Posy stack ducks on the edge of the tub, and my stomach sank. Something about that request felt completely off. It did not feel wrong, exactly, just tight. It felt like a tourniquet twisted one notch too far, slowly cutting off the circulation. I held the phone to my ear and tried to keep my voice steady. "I would really rather give it to her in person at the wedding," I said. "Posy and I want to hand the check to Cammie ourselves." Then came the silence. It was the suffocating kind of silence my mother uses like a weapon, stretching it out long enough to make most people rush to apologize. But I did not. I just stood by the sink and waited. "Fine," she snapped, all the fake sweetness instantly vanishing. "Whatever you want, Wallace." The line went dead. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel and stared down at the blank screen. She wanted that money in her hands a week early. We were still 3 weeks away from the ceremony, and she could not even wait. That should have told me something. Honestly, it did, but I was not ready to hear it yet. I set the phone on the counter and went back to the bathroom. My daughter, Posy, held up a tiny rubber duck from the tub. "This one is you, Mama," she said. It was the smallest one in the water. When I asked her why, she smiled and told me it was because that duck holds all the others up. She was only 6 years old, but kids notice everything. 2 months before the wedding, I found out I was not even a bridesmaid. Cammie's bridal party was just 4 influencer friends from Austin and 2 girls she met at a brand retreat in Scottsdale. Those 6 women matched perfectly in height, hair, and overall social media aesthetic, looking exactly like a curated online grid come to life. I was not truly surprised. You cannot really be surprised by a rejection you already expected, but it still stung, the exact same way a paper cut stings. It was small, quick, and much sharper than it had any right to be. The only thing that kept me going was Posey. Cammy had promised her. She had looked my little girl right in the eyes at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "You are going to be my flower girl, Pose. I will get you the prettiest little dress." My daughter had talked about nothing else ever since, drawing endless pictures of herself throwing pink petals. Every evening, my daughter practiced walking slowly down our narrow hallway, placing one careful foot in front of the other while I softly hummed the wedding march. She would look back at me and ask, "Am I doing it right, Mama?" I always smiled and said, "Perfect, baby, just like that." Cammy's casual, breezy promise was the only remaining thread keeping me connected to this wedding. I kept telling myself that they did not include me, and that was fine. I am a grown woman and I can handle being cast aside. But Posey was only 6. She still believed that adults meant what they said. I held on to that flower girl promise like a fragile rope bridge over a canyon, praying that it would hold. I told myself the only title that actually mattered was Posey wearing her flower crown. So I made the choice to go. It was not for my mother, and if I am being completely honest, it was not for Cammy either. I went for my daughter, for Nana Ruth, and because of a tiny, stubborn part of me that still wanted to believe a $10,000 check and a heartfelt note could unlock a door shut my entire life. I know how that sounds. You are probably sitting there thinking, "Wallace, do not do it." But when you grow up invisible in your own family, you develop an insane tolerance for pain. You learn how to stand in burning rooms and convince yourself it is just warm. You learn to call crumbs a meal. The Army trained me to triage, to sort the urgent from the critical and from the already gone. But I could never triage my own family. They were always critical, always the ones I kept trying to resuscitate. So, I pressed my one good dress and polished my shoes. I hung Posey's flower girl outfit on the back of the bathroom door, a white cotton dress with a ribbon sash I had found on clearance and hemmed myself. I slipped the envelope into my purse and whispered that this was the last time. I have walked into worse rooms than a wedding, but I did not know this one was completely rigged. Then, 1 week before the ceremony, I got an email from the event coordinator at Stonewater Vineyard. The subject line read, "Rehearsal dinner, final guest list." I scrolled through the document. 42 names. Cammy's bridesmaids, Tucker's groomsmen, both sets of parents, the Brants, and 3 of Cammy's influencer friends who had flown in early. I even saw Tucker's college roommate and his roommate's girlfriend, a woman who had apparently only met Cammy once at a lake house. But my name was not there. Neither was Posey's. I read the entire list twice, my chest tightening with every name. Then, I dialed my mother. "Mom," I said when she answered, "we are not on the rehearsal dinner list." "Oh, Wallace," my mother sighed, sounding as if I had demanded a private jet. "The rehearsal dinner is only for the wedding party and immediate family." She told me the Brants are hosting, and they are very particular about numbers. I swallowed hard. Am I not immediate family? Another silence. Shorter this time, but heavier. "You know what I mean," she said. "The Brants have never met Posey, and Tucker's mother has a very specific vision for the evening. We cannot complicate things." Complicate. That is what my daughter was to them, a complication. I looked back at the email. Tucker's college roommate's girlfriend was still on that list. A woman who had met the bride once at a lake house was welcome, but my 6-year-old daughter, who had been promised a flower crown, was just a complication. "Okay," I said. "I understand." I did not understand anything, but after 35 years of saying okay to this family, the muscle memory was strong. If I was not immediate family, what was my $10,000? 4 days before the wedding, Cammie texted me, a wall of text with 3 heart emojis and a plea of, "Do not hate me." She had given the flower girl spot to Tucker's niece. "It is just optics, Wall. Tucker's mom wants all the kids in the ceremony to be Brants. Do not make it a thing," the message concluded. I read it 3 times, then set my phone down and walked into the hallway. Posey's flower girl dress was hanging on the bathroom door, pressed and waiting for a little girl who still believed promises meant something. I dialed my mother immediately. "Did you know about this?" I asked. "About what?" she said. "Posey," I replied. "The flower girl spot." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Wallace!" Her voice sharpened, redirecting the blame as she always did when caught. "It is just one role in one ceremony. You always make everything about you." There it was. That was the exact sentence she had been throwing at me since I was 15. "You always make everything about you." As if asking for a seat at the table was narcissism, and expecting my daughter to be treated like family was self-absorption. "This stopped being about me," I said, the second it touched my daughter. "Do not be dramatic. Posey won't even remember," she sighed. "She talks about it every day, Mom. She practices in the hallway." "Then unpractice her. It is not hard." My mother hung up. I stood in the quiet hallway and stared at the white dress, the ribbon sash I had stitched by hand, and the tiny patent leather shoes lined up underneath. I was not going to unpractice my daughter, but I was not going to fight on the phone either. The medic in me knows that you do not argue with a hemorrhage. You either stop the bleeding or you walk away. Nana Ruth called me that same evening. I could hear her kitchen in the background, the clink of her coffee mug and the low hum of the refrigerator that had been running since 1997. "I heard about the flower girl," she said without any preamble. "How did you know?" I asked. "Colleen Brandt told her bridge partner, who told Myrna at the church, who told me over tomatoes this morning," she said. "Small town, Wallace. The walls are thin." Nana paused. "Your mother did the same thing to me once, at your grandfather's funeral." I did not know this story. "She put me in the back row and told the funeral director I was extended family, just so the front pew would look less crowded for the photos at my own husband's service." My chest tightened. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked. "Because I did not want you to see your mother like that before you were ready," she said. Then she paused again. "Wallace, I need to say something you will not want to hear. The shop is in worse shape than anyone is admitting. Your father owes Harlan Brandt more than I have ever seen written down." "This wedding is not about Cammie," Nana explained. "It is about your parents performing for the one family that holds their note." I stared at the wall as the pieces began to fit. The expensive vineyard, the Brandt-only ceremony, the urgent demand for my money. "Your mother performs family," Nana said quietly. "You and Hal are family." She promised she would be at the wedding and told me to keep my eyes open. Then she said something I carried with me through everything. "I have buried a husband and outlived a lie, so I can stand next to you for 10 minutes. I need to stop here for a second. Up to this point, I still believed I was overreacting. Maybe I really did make everything about me. Maybe a pageant mattered more than a homecoming, and a flower girl swap was just logistics. If you have ever talked yourself out of your own gut feeling about your family, comment the word gut so I know I am not the only one. Okay, back to it, because the next thing I found changed everything. 3 days before the wedding, I sat at our kitchen table, trying to decide if I was brave or stupid. The envelope was propped against the salt shaker. $10,000 of my hard-earned money. It felt like a piece of Posey's future sliced open and handed to people who could not even remember to save her a seat. Posey walked out of her bedroom in her pajamas, holding a colorful piece of construction paper. "Mama, I made this for you," she said, setting it on the table. It was a crayon drawing of 4 figures standing under a bright yellow sun. The tallest one had brown hair and scrubs. That was me. The smallest had pigtails for Posey. Next to us was a shorter figure with curly gray hair for Nana, and floating above everyone, in blue crayon, was a smiling man with wings. "That is Grandpa Hal," she said, pointing to the sky. "He watches us from up there." I stared at the drawing. 4 people. That was her entire concept of family. Not my parents, not Cammie. It wasn't about the grand parish name, the country club, or the hallway shrine of dusty pageant crowns. It was about the real people who showed up, the ones who actually held her. I folded my daughter's sweet crayon drawing carefully and slipped it into my purse, right next to that heavy paper envelope. "I am bringing it with me," I told her. "To the wedding?" she asked, her voice tiny. "Everywhere," I promised. She climbed up into my lap and pressed her warm face right against my collarbone. She smelled of cheap strawberry shampoo and the soapy steam from the laundromat downstairs. "Mama, are we still going to the wedding?" "Yes, baby." "Even though I am not the flower girl anymore?" "Even though," I whispered. She went quiet for a long second, thinking. "Okay," she said softly, "but I am wearing my dress anyway." I held her tighter, my heart breaking. On that sheet of paper, she had drawn every single person who loved her. Sadly, the page wasn't crowded at all. But stick with me, because this is where everything changed. 2 days before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a group text notification. The thread was labeled, "Wedding Logistics, Do Not Forward." Tucker had been trying to add the florist, Wallace at Wild Bloom Florals, but his phone's autofill pulled my contact instead. I knew it was a mistake because the first message after my addition was from Cammie. "Babe, that's my sister, not the florist." I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling as I held the phone and scrolled upward through weeks of back and forths. There they were. My mother, my father, Cammie, and Tucker, planning everything in cold, plain text. A message from Brenda 3 weeks ago read, "Wallace's 10,000 covers Stonewater's final balance. Get it before Friday." Roy replied soon after, "Harlan cannot see us short. This has to look right." Then Cammie 2 weeks ago asked, "Can we just seat her in the back and skip the reception? Limited badge or whatever?" Brenda's cold response came quickly. "Already handled. She will get a paper badge at check-in. No reception access. She won't make a scene. She never does." Tucker wrote, "Works for me." Roy agreed. I read it twice, then 3 times. My brain went straight into triage mode. It is the way it reacts when someone is on a stretcher and the vitals do not make sense. Except this time, the patient was me. They did not forget to seat me. They budgeted me out and kept my money in. That $10,000 was not a gift in their eyes. It was the final installment on a performance designed to convince Harlan Brandt that the Parrish family was still solvent. And that paper badge? That was the humiliating price of admission for a daughter they absolutely needed to pay the bill, but could never afford to have actually sitting at the table. I did not screenshot anything. I did not need to. I had seen it, and that was enough. I closed the group text and sat completely still on my bed for a long time. The medic in me wanted a plan. The daughter in me wanted to cry. The mother in me wanted to drive straight to my parents' house and ask them how they could type those horrible words about their own granddaughter. I did not do any of those things. I just breathed. In through the nose for 4 counts, out through the mouth for 6. It was the exact same breathing I taught scared privates before their first live-fire military exercise. Right then, I made a firm decision. I was not going to record anything. I was not going to forward that ugly thread, post it on social media, or even call a lawyer. I refused to fight them on their stage. Instead, I was going to bring the truth onto it, say it once, and walk away. Their primary weapon was shame. A paper badge, a blocked door, a whispered instruction to stay quiet and act grateful. My weapon, however, would be the absolute truth, spoken calmly right in front of the exact high society audience they were performing for. Then, total silence. Then, simply walking away. That was my entire plan. There would be no loud revenge speech, no dramatic, screaming confrontation. Just a hard fact, a clear boundary, and the sound of my shoes walking toward the exit. I picked up my phone and texted Nana. I found something. I am still going on Saturday. Will you be near the gift table? Her reply came back in less than 2 minutes. I will be there before the ice sculpture even melts. I put my phone back down on the nightstand and lay there in the quiet dark. Through the thin drywall, I could hear Posey breathing softly in her sleep. It was the calm, steady rhythm of a child who completely trusts the world to still be there in the morning. I was going to protect that trust with everything I had, even if it meant losing every other member of my family. The next morning, I called Stonewater Vineyard, not to confirm my own attendance, but to check on Posey's. "Hi," I said when someone answered. "I am calling about the Parish Brant wedding. My daughter was listed as the flower girl, and I just want to verify her spot in the processional." There was a long pause, followed by the rapid clack of typing sounds on a keyboard. "I am sorry, ma'am," the voice on the line said. "I am showing that the flower girl role was reassigned 2 weeks ago to a Miss Addison Brant." My stomach clenched hard, but I kept my voice perfectly flat and steady. Triage voice. "I see," I replied. "Could you also tell me about the reception logistics for my daughter and me? I want to make sure her dietary needs are noted." More typing followed. Then the woman, Marisol, according to her voicemail, cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I really should not say this," she whispered. "But I do not see your name on the reception guest list at all. You are listed under a completely separate category, limited access, ceremony only. And I should also mention, the parish account has an outstanding final balance that was due last Friday. We are still waiting on a deposit to clear." There it was, the very last piece of the puzzle. My $10,000 was the exact deposit they had not sent yet because they were waiting for me to hand it over at the wedding. They expected me to be too polite to ask questions, too grateful to make demands, and too invisible to be noticed taking it back. "Ma'am, are you still there?" "I am here," I said, maintaining my composure. "Thank you, Marisol. You have been very helpful." "I assumed you would want to know," she replied softly. "Most people would." I hung up the phone and just stared blankly at the kitchen wall. If you have ever been completely betrayed by the people who raised you, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. The refrigerator hummed low, the wall clock ticked, and somewhere deep in my mind, the military medic stopped merely triaging the wound and began prepping the operating room. That afternoon, Nana Ruth drove over. She did not call first, she just showed up. I laid it all out for Nana. I told her everything about the group text, Marisol's call, the unpaid final balance, and the paper badge they had planned for me. She sat quietly and listened without interrupting once. When I finally finished, she reached slowly into her purse and pulled out a small object wrapped tenderly in a faded blue handkerchief. "This was Hal's," she said, gently unfolding the soft cloth. It was a wristwatch. It had a brass case that was slightly tarnished and a dark leather band worn soft from decades of daily use. The face was completely plain, no diamonds, no fancy brand name, just simple numbers and two hands that still kept perfect time. "He wore it every day for 41 years, Nana whispered. "Every single morning he would strap it on, kiss me goodbye, and walk down to the shop," she said. "He was never late, never showy, just steady." She turned the watch over in her palm. On the metal inside of the case, scratched deep in my grandfather Hal's own handwriting, were just two words: "Stand up." He wrote that the exact day he opened up his shop, Nana told me. He always said it was the only piece of business advice he would ever need. She pushed the heavy watch across the wooden table toward me. "Wear it on Saturday," she commanded softly. "Hal would have wanted you standing up." I strapped the old watch to my wrist. It felt heavier than I expected, the brass warm, as if it had been waiting for my skin. "Are you sure about this, Nana?" I asked. "I have had it in a drawer for 8 years, she said, covering my hand with hers. "But it needs to be on a wrist that does things, not in a box collecting dust." I wore it to bed that night, feeling Hal's heartbeat in the ticking. Saturday morning, June 8th. The hill country heat was already building by 7 a.m. It is the kind of heavy air that settles on your skin like warm gauze and does not lift until the stars come out. I showered and dressed in a simple navy cotton dress. It was the kind of thing you wear when you want to look neat, but completely unmemorable. I chose flat shoes, knowing I might need to move and walk fast. I braided Posey's hair into 2 neat plaits and helped her slide into the white dress she had picked out for the flower girl role she would never get to play. She twirled in front of the bathroom mirror. "Do I look like a wedding girl, Mama?" "You look like the absolute best girl at any wedding." I slid my grandfather's watch onto my wrist, then tucked the thick envelope into my purse next to Posey's crayon drawing and my phone. Everything I needed for this day fit into one single bag. That felt right. Clean, portable, like a military field kit. On the drive out to Stonewater, the road wound through deep limestone cuts and live oak canopies, and the warm air outside smelled like wild cedar and dry grass. Posey sang along to the radio, some pop song she had learned from a school friend, her feet kicking the back of my seat in time. I watched her in the rearview mirror and made myself a promise. Whatever happened today, she would not see me break. She would see me stand up. I had triaged car wrecks while feeling calmer than this. Chest traumas, arterial bleeds. Once, a kid came in with a pencil through his hand and did not cry until his mom showed up. I understood him now. You hold it together until the safe person arrives. Nana was my safe person, and she was already at the vineyard waiting. Stonewater Vineyard looked like the cover of a luxury magazine nobody in my family could ever afford to subscribe to. A long, crushed limestone drive was lined with live oaks strung with Edison lights, still unlit in the morning sun. The main house was made of native stone and dark timber, surrounded by terraces that stepped down toward a pecan grove where white chairs were arranged in perfect rows. A valet in a starched shirt was parking expensive cars. Tucker's vintage Bronco was already in the front row, gleaming like a showroom piece. Next to it, Harlan Brandt's black Suburban. Behind that stood a long line of trucks and SUVs that probably cost more than my apartment deposit, my student loans, and my divorce attorney combined. "It is pretty, Mama," Posey said, pressing her face against the car window. "It is, baby," I said. At the check-in table, 2 young women in matching linen dresses stood behind a white tablecloth covered in gold foil badges arranged alphabetically. Each one was thick cardstock, calligraphed with a gold ribbon loop. A man in front of me, one of Tucker's loud fraternity brothers by the sound of it, received his gold badge with a warm handshake and a welcome. Mr. Davies. All access. Enjoy the full day. I stepped up and said my name, Wallace Parrish. The woman scanned her list and her smile instantly tightened. She didn't reach into the box of gold badges. Instead, she reached below the table, pulled out a separate folder, and produced a plastic sleeve containing a plain piece of printer paper. On that piece of paper, printed in the exact same font as the lavish dinner menu propped beside the flower arrangement, were 3 words that cut deep. Limited access guest. My name was handwritten in cheap black ink right beneath it. I just stared at it, the paper warm from being hidden under the table. It was deliberate. I was still holding the badge when my mother appeared. She was wearing a champagne-colored dress with beaded sleeves, something you would see at an awards ceremony, not a vineyard in June. Her hair was freshly colored and her nails were flawless. She looked like a woman who had spent a great deal of money to make it look like she had not spent any at all. "Waverly, darling, Wallace, come here," she said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. She grabbed my elbow and steered me 3 steps to the left behind a wooden trellis covered in grapevine. It was the same move she always made. Pull the problem out of the frame and fix it off stage. "That badge," she whispered, her voice dropping to a low hiss that smelled of expensive champagne and hairspray. "That means no plate, Wallace." I stared at her. No plate? The reception is seated. The Brandts are paying for the dinner and they have a strict head count. You can attend the ceremony. Sit in the back, please, but there is no room for you or Posey at the reception. Colleen has this very specific vision, she began. "Mom," my voice was flat, completely steady. "Did Posey get a badge?" My mother blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Posey does not need one. Children do not attend the reception," she started to say. "But Posey was told she would be the flower girl," I countered. "That changed," she snapped. "And nobody bothered to tell her it changed?" I asked. "Wallace, for God's sake, do not make a scene. The Brandts are watching." I looked down at the paper badge, printed in the same font as the menu. Designed. Planned. This was not some last-minute adjustment. This was social architecture. "Go sit down," my mother said dismissively. "Enjoy the ceremony. Leave your gift on the table, and then quietly go home." She patted my arm with cold affection and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the limestone path. "That means no plate." Posey tugged my hand. "Mama, why is our card different?" She was staring at the paper badge. Around us, other guests streamed past, their gold badges gleaming like small shields in the sun. They laughed and greeted each other, moving toward the pecan grove with the absolute certainty of people who belonged. It is just a different kind, baby, I murmured. But theirs are gold. I knelt down to her eye level. Her face was so open, so trusting, that it hurt worse than anything my mother had ever said to me. Listen to me, Posey. We are going to sit in the back for the ceremony. We are going to be very quiet and very brave, and then we are going to do something special. And after that, we are going to leave, okay? What are we going to do? She asked. Something very important. She nodded. She trusted me the way she trusted gravity, completely and without evidence, because I had never let her down. We walked to the ceremony area where white chairs stood in rows of 12, each draped with ivory organza. The front 3 rows were marked Reserved Family with gold tent cards. I did not sit there. I chose the very last row, near the edge where the chairs were plain, cold metal, and the view was partially blocked by a speaker stand. Posey sat next to me, her white dress bright against the metal, her tiny patent leather shoes dangling, not quite reaching the ground. The ceremony was beautiful, I will say that. The pecan grove, the string quartet, the warm light filtering through the branches. Cammie looked like she had been art directed by a team of professionals, which of course she had. Tucker cried during his vows. My mother wept during everything. My father stood at the edge of the family row and did not look in my direction once. Not once. After the ceremony, the photographer gathered the families, Brant's on the left, Parrish's on the right. Colleen Brant repositioned her turquoise and diamond necklace for the camera, while my mother carefully adjusted her beaded sleeves. Roy stood at the end of the row, hands in his pockets, his eyes aimed somewhere past the live oaks. The photographer counted heads. "That everyone?" "That is everyone," my mother said. Posey looked up at me. "Mama, are we not supposed to be in the picture?" "Not today, baby." She pulled the crayon drawing out of my purse. She had been reaching for it all ceremony, and held it against her chest like a shield. The paper crinkled. The yellow sun she had drawn looked up at the real one in the sky. I caught my father's eye for exactly 2 seconds. He stood at the end of the family line, and for a brief moment something heavy moved across his face. Shame, maybe. Or regret. He took a tentative half-step toward us, his mouth opening to say something. But then, my mother's hand found his elbow. The exact same way she had found mine. She pulled him firmly back into position. He did not resist. He just turned away. The photographer's flash went off, and the Parrish family smiled for a picture that did not include the daughter who had saved them $10,000, or the granddaughter who had been promised a flower crown. Roy chose the frame. He always chose the frame. Nana Ruth stood by the trellis near the stone path. She had not been in the photo either, choosing to stand apart from it all. I noticed she had refused to participate. She caught my eye and tilted her head slightly toward the east side of the tent, where the gift table sat under a warm canopy of Edison lights. I gave her a small nod. Posey clutched her drawing. I reached down and touched the cold brass watch on my wrist. It was time. Guests flowed toward the reception tent like a strong current, champagne flutes appearing in their hands as laughter rose. The string quartet transitioned to something jazzy and light. The tent was spectacular, filled with crystal chandeliers, tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white ranunculus, and monogram napkins stacked in silver holders with the initials C and T. A young man in a vest stepped forward. "Ma'am, may I see your badge?" I held up my cheap paper sleeve. His expression flickered. Sympathy, embarrassment, and then practiced neutrality, all in the space of one brief breath. "I am sorry, ma'am. This badge is ceremony only. The reception requires a gold badge." I am the bride's sister, I told him. I understand, but I have strict instructions. Over his shoulder, I could see the head table. My mother was already seated, laughing with Colleen Brandt, performing warmth and wealth like she had rehearsed it in a mirror. My father sat 2 chairs down, studying his champagne. Cammy was holding Tucker's hand, posing for someone's phone. The Brandt crowd filled every table. The auto dealer, the ranch foreman, the country club board. It was every person my parents needed to convince that the Parishes were still on solid ground. And there, 6 feet to my right, just outside the tent entrance, was the gift table. It was a white linen display under Edison lights, loaded with boxes and thick envelopes. One of those envelopes said, "From Wallace and Posey," in my handwriting. I could see the edge of it. The only thing they let me near was the table holding my own money. I looked down at Posey, and she looked up at me. "Mama, is it time for the important thing?" she whispered. "Almost, baby," I replied, standing outside that luxurious tent, holding a cheap paper badge while my daughter asked if we were even family, was the exact moment I stopped hoping. Hoping they would change. Hoping they would finally see us. Hoping that $10,000 and 35 years of showing up could buy what should have been free. If you are still with me, do me a quick favor and subscribe so the next person who needs this story can find it too. Now watch what I did with that envelope, because they never saw it coming. I looked at the paper badge one more time, really looked at it. The font was identical to the dinner menu on the reception tables. It was the exact same typeface, the exact same paperweight. This was not some accidental workaround or a last-minute scramble. No, this was a deliberate design choice. Someone, my mother probably with Cammy's enthusiastic approval, had sat down with the high-end wedding stationer and specifically created a second-class badge just for us. They had printed it, cut it out, slipped it carefully into a cheap plastic sleeve, and written my name on it in black ink. They had actually put effort and thought into my exclusion. They had formatted my rejection. I glanced toward the gift table. My envelope was resting near the left edge, partially covered by a large box wrapped in silver paper, labeled, "From Wallace and Posey." 3 years of overtime. 3 years of eating rice and beans and shopping clearance racks, and 3 years of believing that the size of my sacrifice could offset the size of my invisibility. Inside that envelope was the Stonewater Vineyard final balance of $10,000. The foundation of this whole performance. Take back one envelope, and the whole show loses its floor. Nana Ruth stood 10 feet away near a trellis wrapped in white jasmine. She wore a simple gray dress and flat shoes, not a single piece of jewelry. She looked at me the way she always did, steady, certain, the way a compass looks at north. I touched the brass watch on my wrist and felt the scratched words against my skin. Stand up. Posey was holding my other hand tightly. Her crayon drawing was carefully folded inside my purse. The bright yellow sun, the 4 figures, the real people who actually love her. Everyone else was inside that tent performing their roles. "Mama?" she whispered. "Yes, baby. I am ready." I squeezed her hand back. I was ready too. That means no plate. That means no plate. Those 4 words played on a loop in my head. I walked directly to the gift table. No rush, no dramatic strides. I just kept the calm, measured pace of someone who knows exactly what she is doing. It was the same walk I use when crossing an emergency room when a patient is crashing and panic will not do a single bit of good. My little girl Posey stayed right by my side, her tiny, warm hand gripped tightly in mine as we walked to the gift table. The white linen tablecloth was piled with elegant white flowers, stacked boxes, and thick cards from guests who had been invited to eat, drink, and celebrate. It did not take me long to spot my own envelope. From Wallace and Posey, written in my own hand. The ink was smudged on the corner where someone had shoved it aside to make room for a much larger box. Someone had handled it, read our names, and still decided we did not belong at the reception. I quietly slid my envelope out of the pile and tucked it deep inside my purse. A smooth, clean motion. It felt exactly like pulling an intravenous line in the emergency room. You just have to commit to the motion and never hesitate. Right then, a woman standing nearby, one of the Brandt cousins, judging by her expensive, judgmental look, glanced over. She frowned and asked me if I was taking something from the gift table. I turned and looked her dead in the eye, keeping my voice completely calm and professional. I told her I was retrieving my own gift. She looked confused and asked, "Your own?" I explained that the check inside the envelope belonged to me. It had not been opened or deposited, and since the hosts decided my daughter and I did not deserve a plate at their fancy table, I was taking it back. I said every single word clearly, without once raising my voice. The woman's eyebrows shot up in shock, and two other guests turned to stare. That was when I heard heels clicking rapidly on the limestone path behind me. It was a fast, aggressive rhythm, the sound of a woman who has completely lost control of a situation, but has not realized it yet. Then came her voice. "Wallace!" It was my mother, her tone high and tight. "What are you doing?" she demanded. I turned around to face her. She was standing 5 feet away, her elegant champagne-colored dress catching the glow of the Edison lights. Her face was locked in that specific expression I have known my entire life, the look that meant, "Fix this right now or I will make you regret it." Behind her, guests were starting to notice, their conversations trailing off. Nearby, the string quartet kept playing, but the human sounds, the laughter and chatter, had started to thin out. I looked at my mother and told her simply that I was taking back my envelope. She hissed that I was making a scene, but I replied that I was making a decision. My fingers brushed the brass watch on my wrist, feeling the cool metal against my skin as a reminder to stand tall. "Put it back, Wallace," she whispered, warning me that people were looking. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "Good." The word came out quiet, not angry or triumphant, just final. It felt like the last note of a song that had played for far too long. She stepped closer, swearing that she would make me pay if I dared to embarrass this family in front of the Brandts. "The Brandts?" I tilted my head. "You mean the family Dad owes a fortune to? The ones you are staging this entire lavish wedding to impress?" Her face instantly went pale. It was not pink, not red, but a stark, hollow white. The color of someone who had just heard their deepest secret spoken aloud for the first time. She stammered, asking how I knew. I told her it did not matter. Just then, my father, Roy, appeared at the edge of the tent. He looked like a man watching his own house burn down from across the street. He was present, but completely paralyzed, close, but utterly useless. My sister Cammie was right behind him, her bridal veil slightly crooked, her face cycling through sheer confusion and fury like a slot machine trying to land on a combination. Beyond them stood the entire room. The country club elite, the wealthy Brandt family, Colleen in her bright turquoise dress, and Harlan with his silver hair and quiet authority. These were the very people my parents had spent months planning to deceive. Instead of speaking to my mother or Cammie, I turned and addressed the room. My name is Wallace Parrish, I said clearly. I am the bride's older sister. I am an emergency room nurse and I am a veteran. I am standing here because today, at this wedding, I was handed a paper badge that labeled me a limited access guest. It means I was allowed to watch the ceremony, but I am not allowed to eat, I am not allowed to sit, and I am not allowed to be seen inside that reception tent with the rest of you. I paused, letting my words hang. The silence in the tent grew as thick and heavy as Texas hill country humidity. I continued, explaining that my daughter, Posey, was promised she would be the flower girl. That promise was snatched away so the ceremony could look entirely Brant. She is only 6 years old, and she spent 2 whole months practicing her walk in our narrow hallway. Posey stood right beside me, her little hand squeezing mine tightly. But she did not cry. She is so much tougher than I am. I saved $10,000 over 3 years for this wedding gift, picking up countless overtime shifts and skipping every vacation. I thought this gift would finally prove to my family that I belonged. I held up the white envelope for everyone to see, but here is what I found out. This money was already earmarked to pay the venue's final balance, a balance my parents simply could not cover. They desperately needed my $10,000 to keep this entire day looking like something they could actually afford. They wanted my money, but they just did not want me. I let those words sink in. Across the tent, Harlan Brant slowly set down his champagne glass, and Colleen's hand went straight to her necklace. The country club women began exchanging hushed glances, the exact kind of look that completely rewrites a family's reputation in real time. I placed the envelope back inside my purse and snapped the clasps shut, telling my mother she would not be needing this anymore. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Behind her, the Edison light swayed in a warm breeze that smelled of cedar and the end of a very long lie. The heavy silence lasted for 4 seconds before my mother completely exploded. She screamed that I was ungrateful, shouting that after everything they had done for me, I always made everything about myself. They were the exact same cutting words she had thrown at me 100 times before. But this time, they landed in a room full of people who had just watched her exclude her own daughter from the wedding. This time, her words did not cut me at all. Instead, they cut her. The Brant cousin who had questioned me at the gift table spoke up first, asking in disbelief, "She is your daughter? And she was not even invited to eat?" My mother pivoted quickly toward her. Tears were welling in my mother's eyes now. They were the kind I had seen 1,000 times, manufactured and deployed like smoke grenades. She cried that Colleen did not understand, claiming it was just logistics and the Brant's headcount. But Colleen Brant did not budge. She told her coldly not to put this on her headcount. Hearing her use my mother's name, Patricia, felt like a gavel slamming down. Just then, our wedding planner, Marisol, appeared near the entrance with her clipboard and headset. A guest turned to her, asking if the venue balance was truly unpaid. Marisol glanced at me, then at my mother, before stating carefully that, while she could not discuss client accounts, she could confirm the final settlement had not been received. The murmuring among the guests spread like wind through a pecan grove. My father, Roy, stood completely frozen. He did not step forward to defend my mother, and he did not look at me. Whatever tiny shred of sympathy I might have felt for him evaporated in his cowardly silence. And Cammy? She turned to me with tears streaming down her face, demanding to know if I realized what this would cost her brand and her sponsors. I looked at her, knowing it was still far less than what this had cost her sister. I simply pointed down at Posey, and Cammy's mouth snapped shut. By now, the string quartet had stopped playing. The only sounds left were the low hum of the Edison lights and the distant call of a mockingbird up in the live oaks. Then, Nana Ruth stepped forward. She had been standing near the jasmine trellis this entire time, quiet, steady, watching us the way she always does. She is a woman who buried her husband, outlived many lies, and never needed to raise her voice to command a room. She walked to the edge of the crowd. At 83 years old, wearing flat shoes on the limestone, she had no jewelry except for the thin gold wedding band she has worn since 1962. The room parted and gave her space, the way people do for someone who has earned respect, not through wealth, but through time and character. "My name is Ruth Parrish," she said. "I am Hal Parrish's widow. For 60 years, the Parrish name meant something in this town, not because we were rich, but because we were honest." Nana Ruth looked directly at my mother. "My son built a good name on honest work," she said, her voice steady. "Today I watched his wife spend that entire legacy on a paper badge." Her words landed heavily, like heavy stones dropped into completely still water. My mother made a strange sound, something between a sharp gasp and a sob, and reached out for Roy's arm, but he did not respond to her touch at all. He was just staring at his own mother, with the terrified expression of a man who had just been identified in a police lineup. Nana turned her attention back to me. "Let us go, Wallace," she said quietly. I took hold of Posey's hand and we began to walk away. Behind us, I heard Cammie's voice crack as she cried out. Camilla cried out, "Grandma, please!" But Nana, without turning around, replied, "I will be at home, Camilla, when you are ready to visit without a camera crew." We walked down the limestone path, leaving behind the Edison lights, the live oaks, and the valet station where Tucker's vintage Bronco gleamed in the afternoon sun. Posey's white dress caught the light, her neat braids bouncing with every step she took. She did not look back. She just held my hand and walked exactly the way she had practiced in our hallway, one steady foot in front of the other. We were already halfway down the long driveway when I heard them calling out, "Come back!" It was my mother's voice, sounding raw and completely stripped of its usual artificial structure. "Wallace, come back!" Then my father's voice called out, a beat behind her like an echo. "Waverly! Wallace, please!" He could not even get my name right on the very first try. I stopped and turned around to look. There they were, standing at the top of the path. My mother was clutching her beaded champagne dress, and my father stood with his hands hanging limp at his sides. Cammie was right behind them, her bridal veil streaming in the wind, while Tucker stood awkwardly a few steps back. Behind them was the reception tent, and inside it were 120 guests who now knew the absolute truth. "Wallace, you cannot do this to us!" my mother shouted. The desperation in her voice was entirely real this time, not some act she was putting on. "I did not do this to you," I called back, my voice carrying clearly through the still evening air. "You did this to yourselves. I just stopped paying for your lies." I reached into my purse and pulled out the paper badge they had forced me to wear. Limited access guest. I walked back 3 steps to the gift table, which was still uncovered and gleaming with the generosity of their guests. I set the paper badge down, right in the empty spot where my envelope had been. Paper on linen, gray on white. It was the smallest, quietest protest I could think of. "Mama," Posey whispered, tugging my hand. "Can we go now?" "Yes, baby," I replied. "We can go." I turned and looked at my family one last time. I will always answer if you call me as family, I thought. But I am completely done answering as your personal fund. We turned and walked to the car. I helped Posey into her booster seat and buckled her in. I started the engine, and in the rearview mirror, I watched the vineyard shrink away, along with the live oaks, the Edison lights, the stone house, and 3 lonely figures standing in the driveway watching us leave. I did not wave. I just drove. On Monday, I went to the bank and voided the cashier's check. The teller processed it without a word. $10,000 was returned to my account, and Posey's college fund was fully restored. That afternoon, Marisol called, professional and apologetic, to let me know the parish account remained completely unsettled. When the email came in saying they had issued a formal invoice to my parents, I was told it was just a heads up in case anyone contacted me. But no one did. Or, to be more accurate, absolutely everyone contacted me, just not about the money. For 3 days straight, my phone was a glowing, vibrating nightmare. My mother left voicemail after voicemail, but I could not bring myself to listen to her voice. Then came Cammie. Her first text read, "You ruined the best day of my life." 12 hours later, another one popped up, saying, "Tucker's mom won't return my calls." My father? Absolute silence. In a tiny place like Burl Creek, gossip spreads like wildfire, through the church pews, the grocery store aisles, and the country club parking lot. Within a single week, the fallout began. Colleen Brands quietly stepped down from the joint social committee she used to co-chair with my mother. Then Harlan Brands refused to renew the private financial note he had been carrying for Roy's shop. Nobody openly admitted it was because of the wedding. Nobody had to. Everyone just knew. Meanwhile, Nana Ruth quietly moved her tomato garden to the community plot right near my apartment, just so she could walk over and see Posey after school. She started coming by 3 times a week, teaching my daughter how to deadhead marigolds and identify cardinals by their sweet songs. She never once brought up my parents. And through it all, I kept wearing Hal's watch. Its brass was warming against my skin, the leather softening, the ticking remaining steady. Honestly, everything I ever needed from a church parish, I found right there in a dead man's old wristwatch and his 83-year-old widow. 3 weeks after that disastrous wedding, I finally sat down and sent one single email to my mother, my father, and Cammie. I wrote that I was not angry, because anger takes up energy I would much rather spend on my daughter. I told them I was not asking for an apology, because an apology you have to beg for isn't worth having anyway. I said if they wanted a real relationship with me, built on respect instead of what I could buy for them, they knew my address. I carbon copied Nana Ruth. My mother shot back a reply within the hour, claiming I was being unfair to Cammie. My sister said nothing. My father did not reply either. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter, letting the silence settle, and went to find Posey. She was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, surrounded by her colorful crayons, working intently on a brand new drawing. I asked her what she was making, and she proudly held up the paper. It was a picture of a house, representing our little apartment with the neon laundromat sign visible downstairs. There were 2 figures standing in front, a tall one with messy brown hair and a smaller one wearing pigtails. Behind them, she had drawn Nana with her tomatoes. Right next to the building was a new person, a woman with dark hair holding a clipboard. Posey looked up and said it was Marisol because she was nice to us. 5 figures in total now. Every single person on that paper had earned their spot in our lives. I pinned the drawing to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like Texas. I realized then that a locked door is not a sign of hatred. It is just a door that finally has a key. and that key belongs to me. Love that only shows up when you are useful is not love. It is just an invoice, and you are allowed to stop paying it, especially for the sake of the little ones who are still learning what a family is supposed to feel like. This is my story, a paper badge, a check I took back, and a 6-year-old girl who finally drew herself into the picture. If this reminds you that walking away can be the most loving choice you can make for your kids and yourself, take this as your sign.